Welcome. I'm thrilled to be hosting our first Friday for October, which we have continued with our virtual model over the lunchtime. Hopefully you're enjoying a nice snack with us today, sort of brown bag style digital lunch. My name is Lisa Van Reemdonk. I'm the Executive Director of the School of Public Affairs Institute, where we house our professional development programs, among other things. And so happy to be here today with this really great topic about the changing face of parks, recreation, and open space. It does correspond with and coincide with the launch of a new program that we'll tell you about today. And before we get into this topic, we always like to give you just a little picture of what's going on at the School of Public Affairs these days. And, you know, we are back in the classroom and masked with many of our students and have a terrific group of students right now who in the springtime will be looking for a capstone project. And so we wanted to plant that seed with you all today. Our capstone projects usually last an academic semester, and we have students with a really wide range of interests. Those projects usually incorporate some type of literature review, some type of data analysis, sometimes data collection, sometimes not, and then recommendations to you as a client. And we really do ask our students to have a sort of client relationship with you, not a I'm a student and just supposed to be absorbing, but really that they're giving to you. And at the end of the day, the purpose of the project is for them to prove to us as a school that they've learned a wide variety of things, all the competencies they're supposed to leave the School of Public Affairs with. So this is really a culminating project of their work here at the school. So if you are interested in exploring this relationship with us, I think we're going to toss in the chat a link to become a host for a capstone project. So we'd love to help your organization get that back burner project off the back burner, or get that project that you've been sitting on just one step further through the great work of our students. So on to our topic of the day, the changing face of parks, recreation, and open space. And I'm here today first with Teresa Penbrook, who is co-lead with me on the launch of a new program that we have. And she'll talk a little bit more about that, but it is a program that brings public administration curriculum together with parks and recreation curriculum in order to provide a certificate program, especially dedicated to people working in parks and recreation who may not yet have a bachelor's degree or who have a bachelor's degree in a different area and are really interested in some supervisory roles in parks and recreation. So trying to fill this gap of folks who started their work in parks and recreation and are now at a point in their career where they'd really like to take it up a notch without necessarily going fully back to school, that really accessible certificate program. So I'm really pleased that Teresa and I have been able to co-develop this program that we'll be launching in January. So we'll give you more information about that, but Teresa Penbrook here, she is the CEO and founder of Green Play, also a faculty researcher and educator with the national organization called GP Red, who is a partner with us on that prep program, and then a co-lead with me on the prep program. And we have brought with us three other folks today. Allison Kincaid, the executive director of the Colorado Parks and Recreation Association, Janet Bartnett, who comes to us from mountain recreation, I-70 corridor, sort of Vail, Eagle County area as the executive director. And then Seve Ghosh, who currently is the community services director from the city of Fort Collins, but has definitely been in the space in the Denver metro area, leading organizations in parks and recreation for a while. So you might know of him. This is his new job that he's coming to us from. So these folks all know each other, are all colleagues. And so today might feel a little bit more like a conversation where they're asking each other questions. We'll leave that open for us to talk about this really interesting issue that these folks are working on a day-to-day basis. First, we want to hear from you. And so we have a little poll. We would love for you to give us, from your perspective and the community you live in, what do you think should be the top 3 priorities for funding broadly? And we can't see who you are voting for what, so it's anonymous. So don't worry, you can be honest what you really think about where our funding priorities should lie. And those answers are coming in, and then Emma will show us the results so that you all can see what you think. Just a few more votes coming in here. Looks great. Emma, can we show everyone else? Can they see it? There we go. Okay, so not surprising, neck and neck with this audience between Parks and Recreation and Public Health. And I think one of the things we'll talk about today is how much more intertwined these things need and should be. And then close behind it, Public Works and Planning. So thanks for your thoughts there. Hopefully it's just interesting to you as well. All right, so we'll move the poll out of the way. And the way we're going to work this is we'll start and have just a little bit of a brief conversation from each, or brief presentation from each one of our panelists. They'll cover some of their high-level thinking about and their vantage point from their organizations about this question of the future of Parks and Recreation. And then we'll go into some questions. There is a Q&A area, so at any point you can be adding questions to the Q&A. We can all see them. And then if you're seeing someone else's question in the Q&A and you are also interested in an answer, there's a like button. There's a like button on everything these days, isn't there? There's a like button, and then we'll know that there's a particular question that the audience is really interested in, and we'll make sure that we get to that first. So feel free to use that Q&A to do that. We might try to answer some of them right in the text if it's a quick and easy answer. If you're asking us something to discuss, then we'll try to get to it near the end here. So I'm going to start, I think, Allison, you are going to kick us off a little bit from that statewide perspective and your work with all the Parks and Rec departments and districts across the state. So take it away. Thanks, Allison.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Lisa. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. I saw some familiar names on the attendee list. So hello to all of my colleagues and friends. Wanted to share just a little bit about CPRA for those of you who don't know who we are. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that's a member-based organization. And our members are Parks and Recreation professionals from all over the state of Colorado. Right now, we're at approximately 1,400 members, representing more than 120 park and recreation agencies. When I describe our organization, I say that probably the most underrepresented agencies in our membership are your really small communities, you know, your extreme Eastern Plains and some of those that are maybe a one-person show. But otherwise, I'm really proud to say that we have pretty great representation around the state. And our mission is written here. I won't read it for you. I'll allow you to read it yourself. But one of the things that we like to say as a staff is, you know, we really see our job as making Parks and Recreation professionals be the absolute best they can be at what they do through information sharing and training and networking and just setting the stage for all the amazing professionals in our state who are doing this work. So next slide, please. A few just highlights of what we do for those of you who don't know a whole lot about CPRA. These are some of the core areas where I see that we do a lot of work. We're a small staff of 4 employees, so strategic partnerships and partnerships are just huge. So that includes some national partnerships, a lot of statewide ones, including the Colorado Outdoor Partnership. We are also involved in Care for Colorado, the Recreate Responsibly Coalition, the public health departments, and then we are involved with industry partners. And those are the name that we have for companies that would like to promote to our park and recreation professionals, but also have really great resources that we can share. So strategic partnerships is probably one of the more significant things that I spend my time on in terms of staying tuned in to trends that are happening, resources that might be available, and how we can pivot as an organization to serve our members. And then we use communications and marketing quite a bit. I think we do pretty good for a pretty small team. I don't know, the folks on this panel might be able to share more input on that, but we do try to share trends and information in a timely manner as possible During COVID, like a lot of organizations, we really prioritized making sure we could get networking and information sharing as a top priority. So those are some of the things that we're constantly working on as a team. And then education here is really about professional development. As I said, our goal is to make parks and recreation professionals in Colorado the best that they can be. And a huge part of our funding model is professional development. So as you can imagine, parks and recreation is super diverse, and most of you know that. We have the parks arm, we have the recreation arm, we have programming, we have all of these lovely things. And so we really try to focus and make sure we're doing the absolute best that we can for everybody as much as possible. And then advocacy is one of those areas that is almost an as needed, but almost always, right? So we really activate our membership and advocacy in areas like the lottery reauthorization and Go co-funding, right? So that's an area where CPRA will really activate and get super involved. The rest of the time, we really rely on advocacy as we kind of feel out what our members need and then jump on board as needed for our membership. Next slide, please. So when I was asked to think about some of our trends from the statewide level, these are some of the things that have popped up for me. And I think that these will probably resonate with any of our professionals here and maybe any of their colleagues as well. Overall, in parks and recreation, and just any sector, I think we're all feeling that what I call the hiring crisis, right? In particular, our parks professionals and the parks industry within our state have really struggled to get enough employees to just get the work done. And then compounded with that, when we talk a little bit below in this slide with the amount of people using our outdoor spaces, has put quite a lot of pressure on our industry this year. So we've really been paying attention to that hiring crisis and trying to think about how we can respond as an organization. We've been, with some funding from Game Time Playgrounds, we actually have a marketing campaign going on where we've recruited some lovely marketing videos that are highlighting why people are in parks and recreation, how fun it is. I mean, everybody's so amazing. They're some of the best people to work with. How can we let young adults know that? How can we bring people into the fold and let them learn about what a great industry this is to work in? So that's an example of one of the ways that we're trying to be innovative and address this issue. And then what aligns with that is the loss of the college and university feeder program. So our hope is to take that to the next level in 2022 and explore how we can also create maybe some videos and some marketing collateral around getting into some Colorado colleges and universities and encourage students to think about a career in our industry. Outdoor spaces, I hinted on this a little bit with the hiring crisis, but in Colorado in particular, I think we all know the increased population growth, right? And the challenges that come along with more people using these limited spaces that we have. And in particular, I think it's been fascinating to see, and I'm so proud of our industry because we are the local parks or the 10-minute walk to a park. We're somewhere close where a family can go recreate, but we're also taken for granted. And what I mean by that is there's so much work going into our federal lands because Colorado, we're so blessed to have so many federal and state lands, but we tend to be the forgotten kind of partner in that we create this space for these people to go recreate in. And we really felt the pressure in a way that we hadn't felt before during the pandemic and ongoing. So one of the things that we are continuing to talk about, including some exploring a partnership with Leave No Trace in Colorado and the Colorado Tourism Office and their Care for Colorado Coalition, we're exploring how we can maybe address some of these increased pressures on our local, what we're calling front country outdoor spaces. And of course, our ongoing challenges in just supporting our Colorado's homeless and the professionals that interact with them, and how can we as an organization provide the training and the resources needed to allow those people to do the best work that they can. And then just the stewardship piece goes along with the Leave No Trace. So I'm going to plant a seed, keep an eye out for that. CPRA is hoping to do a little bit more work in that area. And then I do know that, Janet and Seve are going to have a lot of insight on all of this as well. So I'm not going to get too far into the weeds. When I get into recreation from the statewide perspective, what I really see is an ongoing challenge of changing public health orders in our state. So each county has different public health orders, so that each recreation department has to react differently. And sometimes they have a neighboring community that can be more open than they can, and it creates challenges. And this was particularly bad during, really at the height of the pandemic, but I think we still see a little bit of it now. We are still seeing a little bit of this, what I'm calling just uncertainty in athletic programming within our organization. We have a recreational athletics program called CPRA. And when I say uncertainty, there's just, because of that inconsistency between communities, it's a little bit harder for us to operate the way we did before. So what does that now look like? And we're still kind of exploring that. And then I think this is just ongoing and something that I don't think will go away, and has came up when the pandemic was really in the thick of it. And it still is sort of on people's minds. And what is our role? Has our role as Parks and Recreation changed in any way? And how we support, social services and public health in those other areas. We really ramped up and became fantastic partners in the last year and a half. Will it stay that way? I think it will. There are a lot of opportunities. So I think we have yet to see where that will lead us. Thank you.
All right. So I think, Janet, you're going to talk next about the perspective in the I-70 corridor sort of mountains, and maybe add a little detail to what Allison's talking about and share your different perspective there.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I'm Janet Bartnick, Executive Director with Mountain Recreation. Those of you who have been around the Eagle County area will probably know us as Western Eagle County Metropolitan Recreation District, or WECMERD. We decided that it would be good to change our name to Mountain Rec, and that seems to have stuck way better. I can see Sevy's giggling back there. For those of you who do know us, we are the Western Eagle area. So we start in Edwards and stretch all the way to Dotsero, stretch up 131 Highway and catch McCoy and Bond along the way. We technically don't have very many parks, so we're mostly activity center areas, service hubs. Edwards has a field house, Eagle has a pool and ice rink, and Gypsum has a full-blown community center that was actually built by the town of Gypsum, and we operate on their behalf. I arrived about 4 years ago with most of my professional career having been in Missouri, and it's been an interesting change and such a joy to be in the mountains. I just can't tell you all how great it's been. But our board flipped in 2016, and they hired me in 2017. And so we've had an opportunity to rethink recreation, really pre-pandemic, started making a lot of changes. And I think what you'll see, I've got a little sidebar there on toward equity. When the pandemic hit, the partnerships and relationships that we had built with public health and other health-related organizations in the community really set us up to be a key partner in getting us through the pandemic. And I felt like one of the key things, our new mission after we changed our name, changed our logo, changed our uniforms, really was everyone deserves to be healthy and happy. And I think that has become our motto that we walk with every day. And when we got to the point through the pandemic, after we had done a lot of work, we actually loaned 2 of our communications folks over to Eagle County to help share information because of the relationships we built with the communities around, to share information about the pandemic and the public health orders. We were kind of on hiatus anyway, but had to make a quick change when towards the end of April, the public health order variances were issued and our county was getting a variance and we were going to be able to open our recreation center. I will tell you quite frankly that I spent overnight awake one night thinking about how all of the private clubs who were much smaller ships to turn were going to be able to open very shortly after that announcement towards the end of April, and that our big Titanic was going to be a little bit harder to turn. But I felt like it was something that had to happen when it comes to really thinking about equity and access to healthy services and creating those social connections. It was something that we felt was so important that we made the decision to go ahead and open our rec center on May 11th. I believe we were only one of 2 to reopen that early. I feel like Fruta was the other one. So anyway, thinking about recreation from the lens of health and really understanding equity and what role we play in it was key for a lot of the things that I'll talk about on the next slide. So Teresa, can you flip for me? Fabulous. Thanks. I've been teaching that Parks and Recreation is a key player in the health system for a number of years. And a lot of that work started with actually a green play project that we did called the Healthy Communities Research Group Project back when I worked in Missouri, but also it connected to my background in exercise science. So one of the first things I do as a Parks and Recreation director is go directly to our public health folks and talk to the public health director about what the major issues are in the community. And so pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, it doesn't matter to me. I'm always going to go to that health office and find out what are the key health factors in the community that need to be worked on. Here, it's definitely mental health, much more so than what we had in Missouri, which was childhood obesity. And so we've been working on developing systems and facilities and programs that really address the mental health issues we have in the mountains. The All Access Rec program is a capital project initiative that really is built around the idea of social connections, social connectedness, physical activity, and the endorphins that come from that to help promote positive health, particularly mental health in our community. It would convert the 2 seasonal facilities, the Field House in Edwards and the Pool and Ice Rink in Eagle, into full-blown community centers, with the idea being that we can have multi-purpose room spaces where people can connect, as well as opportunities for folks just to be healthy. That will actually be on the ballot in November, and we'll see where that lands. But we really think that the future of our district really is to serve as that community space where a lot of our nonprofits who have expertise outside of what we have in the behavioral health, mental health, and other health focus areas can come in and use those spaces to assist us in serving the community in the best possible way. Another project that we've been working on also in the equity area is our Forward Together project. And I wanted to make sure that I highlighted, this is actually a project that is staff-led. It is funded by the Colorado Health Foundation. Can't thank them enough for the funding they've afforded us to begin to look at a DEI journey. What does our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey look like? We've hired on a contractor to come in to work on training our staff almost on a precursor to DEI. We're actually not quite there yet. A lot of our staff were in different places along their DEI journey, and it was important for us to move everyone forward in understanding diversity and its importance, meaningful representation, in order for us to get to a place where we could create these new facilities under the All Access Rec program that are going to be welcoming and provide that affordable, accessible experience with everyone in the community. And we wanted our staff to be in the great place for that. And so Forward Together has moved along. We're now getting ready to issue a second RFQ to bring in potentially 2 consultants, one to continue the training work to create that sense of belonging, not just across our team, but that extends into that sense of belonging across our community. But then 2, the second part will actually be to begin making more changes to our systems and our processes that ensure equity across the board. We've already started working on looking at representation across our staff. And I think this is a massive effort that all Parks and Recreation agencies should be engaged in to ensure their communities get the services that they need. I know Allison mentioned earlier quite a few of the workforce-related issues that we're having. In the mountains, it's no surprise. We are having to increase rates to try to get anyone, and we're not able sometimes to offer programs because of the workforce-related issues that we have, particularly in our area where we have resort-style wages in a very expensive place to live. It's very difficult to find folks who are willing to work for a smaller wage, and sometimes it's just difficult to find a body to work at all. So we are working on figuring out how to deal with some of the workforce-related issues. A lot of that has to do with housing and childcare. So we're digging into some of our policies and processes internally to see how we can support staff in better ways with housing programs, childcare support and assistance, and that kind of thing. As well, we're working on internal employee engagement and retention issues. If we can't get new folks to come into work, we certainly have to keep the ones that we've got. And we noticed through the pandemic that there was a pretty good divide that had built between our administrative team and the remainder of our full-time team. And that divide was almost a mistrust. You know, we had this management team working so hard trying to figure out what all the protocols would be to begin to open and offer programs again. And there was just a lot of fear and uncertainty across the supervisor team to figure out exactly, you know, what are they talking about up there? Are they talking about us? And how are they talking about us? And they're not really working. So we saw this interesting divide, and we've been working for about a year now on reunifying our district and ensuring that we have systems in place for strong communication, employee engagement, and retention that'll keep our folks on board. At the same time, with the Forward Together, we're also looking at when we do lose a staff member, how do we recruit and change the face of our district from its staffing representation? So that's a lot to say. I do have on the next slide my contact information. I could talk for days, but you don't want to hear that. I do have an email address there if you'd like to borrow it and send me a note. I'm happy to chat offline.
Thank you, Janet. Yeah, you're taking this up another level. When we said there was a lot going on, this is a really dynamic future of Parks and Recreation. You just keep adding to the reasons that why it is dynamic. And thanks for sharing some of sort of the vulnerability about your own organization, because if we were in a room together, I guarantee there would be people nodding heads experiencing that same thing, that our staffs start to change and evolve in ways that we don't necessarily have as much control over through the pandemic. So I think next, Seve, if you would share your perspective from Fort Collins, and certainly, of course, we know that you will be bringing your perspective from the other places you've worked in the metro area as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. No, appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts here. So you've heard a little bit about the programmatical side and a little bit of the structural side of Parks and Recreation in Colorado, or in parts of Colorado. What I'm going to touch on is more the organizational improvement piece. And I've been talking to these topics for, I would say, about the last 5 or 6 years. And actually, some of you might have also attended the NRPA conference last week and might have heard or seen this similar presentation in a different format. So, but anyway, I think the topics are very relevant and very important. So, Teresa, if we could go to the next slide, please. So what I concentrate on and have talked about for the last 5 or 6 years are these 6 main topics. And it continues to evolve, obviously, as times change. You know, with the COVID and post-pandemic era, that's why I kind of changed the heading to the 21st century, because it gave us, you know, a good insight into our profession and how best we can adapt and adopt new ways of doing business. And that's basically what it is, you know. And I think, and I'll start from the early part of it. So we are in a great profession. We are the fun department. We do a lot in the community, but how many in the community actually know about us? You know, and so the storytelling piece has always been big for me. You know, I just moved to Fort Collins about 3 months ago. So I've been here and I walk in the evening or ride the bike on the trails and so on. I meet a lot of folks, but when I tell them what I do, and they just have this big-eyed look and not knowing exactly, you know, they had misconceptions of all the things that community services offers in the city of Fort Collins here as an example, but I'm assuming that's the same across the country. So telling our story and using the force of social media nowadays, which is very active everywhere, I think we need to change that format to work more for us so that we are able to better tell our story to a wider, much wider audience, you know, and I think that's again on us. So that's why I keep talking about the organizational piece, because a lot of these things are on us. I think if we do all of these 6 things, among others, and continue to do all the other great things we do, we can be in a lot better place in the 21st century. What I've experienced in my 30 plus years in the business, and also having worked in 5 other states, including some pretty forward-thinking parks and recreation areas like Louisville, Kentucky, and Portland, Oregon, is that somehow our profession lacks that bold leadership. But what I mean by that is many of our peers, including myself, sometimes were afraid to take risks, you know. And I always hearken back to the days when Robert Moses was the public works director in New York from 1945 to 75. and I do agree, some of his tactics probably are not, won't be appropriate for the 21st century. But what he was able to do was put focus through his power that was given to him as the Public Works Director to offer great amenities to the residents of New York. And he did basically took the bull by the horns and did it all by himself, so to speak. He didn't basically care what other people thought, but obviously times have changed now. But it also reminds me that I think we need to have more strong leadership in Parks and Recreation. And and many a times where I've tried that avenue, usually you get shunted or you get told not to bring that up, again. And I wish more of us would speak up when we do have the opportunity. And I think the COVID times have shown us that we should do that and can do that. And then the other piece to talk about here real quick is innovation. In Parks and Recreation, we have been the same profession for many, many years. And that's my outside view in the profession. I mean, I even look at the program guides across the country. If you look at the program guide, other than the quality of the presentation, the material or the content has not changed. It's the same programs, same offerings. In fact, what tends to bother me a little bit is sometimes, many departments call many programs successful. And I always question, like, okay, so how many people do you have in that program? And then when you dig deeper, you find out it's the same 6 to 10 people that are doing that same class over and over again. And we call it a successful program. So to me, that's not good enough. And then on top of that, I might get told, well, by the way, the class is full with the 10, but we have 6 on the waiting list. So my argument would be, why not split it up and go 8 and 8 and have it in 2 different places, So that's how my mind works in recreation. And I feel there's a little bit of stodginess in our profession to change, aversity or averse to change. And again, it goes back to the risk taking and just kind of being comfortable with the status quo. So innovation is a tough one to come by. I feel like, again, we have opportunities given galore, especially post-pandemic, to offer those innovations. I'm sure you've also seen people are designing their own Parks and Recreation programs, so to speak. They want to recreate when they want to recreate, not when we offer the building or the facility, say we want to open from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., but they might want to work out or be in the fitness center from 9 p.m. to midnight. So how do we accommodate that group into our programs and amenities and use of amenities? So that's something that where innovation has to play a role. And obviously you've heard from Allison too about partnerships and so on. Why duplicate the effort? If you have 5 rec centers competing for that same crowd, that's not going to work. So you might even have to make that tough decision, again, bold leadership about maybe potentially repurposing 2 of those centers and keeping 3 open and things like that. And those are the opportunities that are coming forward here, and they'll come quick and fast here in the coming years. As professionals, we will have to make those decisions in the coming years. I do not see or foresee too many building of large rec centers in the coming at least 5 to 8 years, at least what I learned from my peers around the country. And then the big elephant in the room is the equity and inclusion piece. We talk about it. We have been talking about it for many years, but I have not seen any improvement over the years. It's a lot of talk, lots of plans. So it has to be genuine. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in this sector of equity and inclusion. We always say, well, we're very inclusive in Parks and Recreation. That's true. Absolutely, because we were the one equalizer through the 50s, 60s, and so on. But there were still parks and programs that were segregated. And even now, I think it's segregated more by level of income, access, and things like that. Maybe not necessarily by cultural pieces, but on the income level, and especially how do we create more equity and full inclusion? And I think that's where we struggle. The metaphor I like to use is the dance metaphor. So it's great to be invited to the dance, but not being asked to dance is the issue. So that we're not getting to full equity, but we're getting to equality. Well, equality and equity are 2 different things. And I think in our profession, we tend to confuse the 2 also. And then obviously inclusion is the full palette of programming, offering the accommodations to the community that has a recognized disability and so on, which continues to grow. As we know, even newborns, about 20% of newborns are born with some recognized disability. How do we bring them into the Parks and Recreation fold in a I guess, responsible way, in a positive way, and in a full inclusion way, and right from the beginning. And we have those opportunities. So maybe this is where a lot of our rec facilities, as they maybe fall out of use, maybe could be used for other opportunities that presents itself on the equity and inclusion side. And then another major topic that I've learned over the years, succession planning, that we are, averse to, meaning that, oh, we'll wait till Joe retires or Jill retires and then we'll figure things out. Well, it comes, again, quick and fast. So how do we plan for the future? So succession planning, as Allison mentioned about the situation with the universities, we're not getting the graduates, from the Parks and Recreation field, because 30, 35 years ago, we used to have close to 500 universities offering the Recreation Administration program. Now there are barely 100 universities around the country offering that degree program. And I saw the attendance list. I think Karen Wenzel, who used to be a professor at Metropolitan State, used to run the program. Well, that just got dropped last year after being given a short lifeline, but it's gone now. So in the metro area, I believe Colorado State might be the only one that offers something close to the Recreation Administration program. So that's a challenge too. So you're not getting the fully versed in Parks and Recreation graduates entering the field. And that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing in some ways, but again, we have to go back and train them, train the incoming graduates into how Parks and Recreation works. So succession planning is a tough one. I think we need to put some more focus on it. Where I like to see some of that go is on the mentoring and coaching of young professionals. So maybe we do get young professionals from other fields, say environmental engineering, horticulture, science. And as we mentor and coach them, we want to leave a legacy, not just that, but also a succession piece, after mentoring and coaching for 10 years, whether they stay in your organization or go somewhere else, is still in the field of Parks and Recreation around the country that we can benefit from. So, and then the last piece is resiliency, which came again, very quickly during the pandemic year and a half or so. And it's not just about being resilient financially, but also programmatically. And you saw that in many of the agencies, we were able to adapt and adopt very quickly the programming setup, hours, and the capacity limits, and all of those. We were able to work through them. And that's what is needed across the board. We are not as nimble sometimes. We get caught up in the government bureaucratic steps about doing this and doing that first before we welcome the people. I like to reverse the pyramid and say we need to welcome the people first and worry about the side effects later, because those are policy things that can be worked through in the latter stages. But we need to get the people into the buildings or into the programs, into the amenities first, and hopefully work with our risk managers and our attorneys to work the side issues out. But those are my 6 main topics, and I'm sure there'll be questions. I'll be happy to answer. So, thank you.
Thank you. Again, just building up really this description of the complexity. And so we'll wrap up these first statements, Teresa, with you giving us a bit of that national perspective, and then also the individual local agencies that you work with, some of those stories.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And I just have to say, I'm really honored to be presenting with all of these amazing panelists. And as I look at the attendee list, you've got a lot of great folks attending this conversation. So a lot of you out there are the experts. And so what I'm going to talk about is just tie up some of the key things that I'm hearing. I grew up in the Colorado system. I grew up in Westminster across from the Swim and Fitness Center. And I, working my way up through the ranks, I worked for 3 different public agencies in Colorado before founding Greenplay. And so Greenplay is a management consulting firm that I founded in 1999, which I can't believe, after working, really looking at the idea of how do we take an entrepreneurial approach and yet at the same time provide public services better. And I'd hired some consultants, and I was actually not quite so happy with some of them. So I thought, back then I was pretty cocky, and I thought, well, how can I do this better? And luckily we've been able to come up with some of the answers. So having worked at over 600 communities in Colorado and around the United States, one of the things we're constantly looking at is systems planning. We're doing master planning, strategic planning, and also the idea of how do we bring in a lot of the topics that the other panelists have covered today, looking at how do we make priorities and that sort of thing. So I'm always pretty action focused. In 2009, I was part of a great group that co-founded GP RED, and RED stands for Research, Education, and Development, and Greenplay was a founding sponsor, so that's what the GP is. But the whole idea here was to fill the gaps, as we have wonderful relationships with our state associations like CPRA and Great Working Alliance with Allison and her crew, but then also other states, the National Recreation and Parks Association, and then other international and national organizations that are out there doing work in this realm of parks, recreation, open space, trails, and allied professionals. One of the things we know at this point, and this is a big trend for us, is that there are so many different things that what we put under that Parks and Recreation umbrella are covered in communities. And so, some agencies handle libraries, some handle airports, some handle medians. So often it's whatever needs to go someplace else to get handled in a municipality or a district or any place gets thrown under that Parks and Recreation umbrella. And so when we talk about who we help, it's often typically targeted to those professionals who are working in that realm, but also working with universities. I've had the good fortune of working with North Carolina State University, and then coming to work in Colorado, working with Karen Wenzel, who said I mentioned, hi Karen, at Metro State before that program was discontinued. And then also now working with Lisa at SPA at the CU to create the prep program here. And so for me, my passion is about how do we bring these people together? How do we fill the gaps that we're all seeing across Colorado and across the country? Some of the big focus areas, and I'm going to try not to repeat some of the key items that our other panelists talked about, but this idea of representation and respect. We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Honestly, growing up in Colorado, I recognized when I moved to North Carolina primarily what a bubble I had grown up in. Our minority rates, especially when I was growing up, were pretty low in Colorado. And as I started to recognize, I honestly thought that we were kind of past all of these issues. And I realized quickly how ignorant I was. And, the idea of there's a whole lot of challenges. Systemic racism is still very, very real in our communities. As you all know, we've had a lot of highlights come up out of this. And so in the last couple of years, especially. And so we're looking at how do we provide representation and respect, making sure that anything that's offered is representative of the demographics within that community. The other things that we do are this connect, convene, and collaborate, basically trying to bring people together. And so I was happy that Lisa asked me to help create this panel. This is one example of what I do on a daily basis now, is try and identify the experts, the topic experts out there, the thought leaders. And through GP Red, most of the folks on this panel are related to GP Red in some way, whether on an advisory board or Janet's on our governing operating board. What we're trying to do is make sure that we are bringing in the best practices, translating them, but not only translating from the academic realm to the practice realm, which is a big focus area, but also from the practice realm, who's actually doing the work in the communities and bringing that back to the research realm so that and the education realm so that our curriculum can continue to be updated. The whole point here is that we really do have to tell the story together. And so as we're talking about storytelling, we're talking about identity. It's like, how do we leverage all the actions? And so I would really kind of invite all of you who are attending this to go ahead and get familiar with GP Red. We're really happy that you're here today talking about this topic with CU Denver, and then help us tell the story together. Just kind of I wanted to kind of summarize some of the items here that we see on a national level. They are in Colorado also, but I'm not going to go too far into workforce development, but this is the thing hitting us. We're losing a ton of our workforce to retirement, and we are having a huge challenge in getting new workforce into the positions. So most of our agencies have openings. And so if you've got young folks that you're working with, this is a great place to tell them that there's a lot of opportunity in this field. At the same time, if you're a decision maker in a community, we really need to look at wage structures. Most Parks and Recreation wage scales are too low to have competitive positions that will attract people for the long haul. And so we need to make sure that we're really updating those wage scales so that we can keep qualified people to do this quality of life work. I'm very involved in the idea of education. And so we at GP Red, we started a state of education committee almost a year and a half, 2 years ago. And we did a full research around the country looking at what are the various universities doing right now? How are things changing? And then also what's changing in the practice realm and what do we need in the practice realm from the university realm. We also did a survey of some students in North Carolina to try and figure out, okay, what's happening with the students? And so the results of that research brief are available for you at that link that I provided here. You can just go to the gpred.org website and look under research briefs, and kind of get a feel for what's happening out there. But this conversation we're talking about today, and I'll talk a little bit more about the PrEP program, is really one of the outcomes that we are moving forward on. And how do we improve our education so that we can continue to supply qualified staff within the workforce? The workforce locations are changing. You all know this. I mean, most of us, we're all doing this online. We're working from our homes, and the technology is changing. If you're not at home, people are just starting to go back into the office. And how do we do that safely, especially if people have been working from home? I think everyone's adapted pretty well now. We've been doing this for over a year and a half, but at the same time, it has changed how people expect to work. And so we are addressing that. A lot of Parks and Recreation is in person. We provide experiences. And so we need to be able to keep that going. And then this focus on economic impact and health. The economic impact, we now have the ability to quantify our impacts for financial aspects. So economic benefits, both direct and indirect for any community. We have planning tools to do this. We can measure social benefits. We can measure environmental benefits through system planning. And all of this is just really tied to this focus on storytelling essentiality. How Parks and Recreation has really emerged to be so important in our communities. The demand is higher than ever. And people, as we're doing community surveying across the country, we're seeing that people really want more of what we do. So how do we provide that given scarce resources and that sort of thing? So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to just real briefly touch on this new program. Lisa, do you want me to cover this real quick?
Sure, yeah. And then we've got some great questions. So
yeah, great. I just want to be quick. I know I want to get to the questions that we have. So in looking at all this, one of the ways that we believe that we can help is this creation of the Parks and Recreation Emerging Professionals Program. So this, in working with Lisa and the School of Public Affairs Institute, are creating this accelerated online learning program. And this is designed, I know that there is one of the questions, so hopefully we can help answer this. We're looking for those people who either are not going to be able to be resourced to get a 4-year degree, but they really need a strong background. So maybe they've been working as lifeguards or frontline personnel, and they're ready to work full time and they're great employees, but how can we get them the background that allows them to have the competencies to move to a mid or a senior level within their organization, or people from another field? And that was the question in the question Q&A was, this is designed so if you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in another field, that you can do this credentialed online learning program and be prepared to apply for full-time positions within Parks and Recreation. And so we're very excited to be teaching the competencies, and the cohort is supposed to start in January. So we're doing a lot of recruitment and would appreciate all of you sharing this with everyone, and we can provide the links. Lisa can make those available. We're working towards credentialing so that we're hoping to have this be a feeder program. So it's not replacing 4-year programs in any way, but it is feeding students who do want to get more, and hopefully will go back if they want to move up, and trying to keep the price affordable. So that's just one of the areas we're working on. I'm really happy to be announcing that here at CU Denver, and I'll stop there, Lisa, if you want to move forward. And we can take
absolutely. We forgot, Teresa, to mention that we've got some terrific startup funding from the VF Foundation, actually, for the PrEP program. So they have supported us in helping do some recruitment, but then also provide scholarships for folks who wouldn't normally be able to pay, or whose employers can't pay the full amount. So we're excited for that partnership with the VF Foundation. And so you can see all of the dynamics and why we wanted to bring these folks together. You all are asking some great questions in the chat, and I wanted to start with one from Zhang Yu. Hi, one of our folks at SPA. And he posted a link to a High Country News article about that many unhoused people are making a home at federal and state public lands. And we also know our making a space, or camping out, that sort of thing in our local parks as well, and using some of the open resources that are available in our local parks. So is there someone that wants to talk a little bit about how Parks and Recreation is currently in Colorado thinking about this, this issue of people who are unhoused using parks to live in and to get their basic, sort of needs met?
Well, maybe, Lisa, I can just make a statement from kind of the national level. This is reality, and that people who are unhoused across the country, then one of the first places they go is parks. And so it is, I had a great quote came from a gentleman in Portland, Oregon, who said, people who are considered homeless or unhoused are residents also. They just happen to not have a domicile to live in. And so recognizing that as we're taking care of the people in our communities, it is a fact in pretty much every community that we have in Colorado and across the country. And so there are some improved, a lot of communities are doing better. Some are doing better than others. I'll leave it at that. And maybe I'll open it up. I know Janet and Seve have probably dealt with this both. And so if you want to talk about some details about how you're handling it, but from a systems planning standpoint, we recognize it is happening, it's a reality, and it's not something that we can just hide and hope it will go away. So we need to address it. Janet or Seve, do you want to chime in?
Sure. This is Seve Ghosh again. Having worked in Portland for 4 years in the early 2000s, I can share that was the very beginning of the accommodation or best practices for allowing the homeless into the parks, and we're very empathetic, very sympathetic to the cause, and that was the attitude we took as Parks and Recreation professionals. But as the numbers grew and the pushback from the community, grew, a lot of those things changed politically and because of politics and other things. But we were able to create a tiny village, tiny home village in Portland that also helped, where the city offered certain levels of training in different fields of work, where they could live for no more than 6 months and so on, and then have to move on. Was one way to curb homelessness. But here in Fort Collins, we're seeing a rising number. I mean, I'll use the latest example here. But again, we're doing it with a very high level of sympathy, empathy, and so on. We work with them. We even our police are trained to offer all the resources that are available in the county. So in Larimer County. So overall, again, the approach has been more, I guess kindness goes a long way, so to speak. And then also what that allows us to do here in Fort Collins is to partner with all our local agencies, nonprofits that are also doing the great work in conjunction with us. It's not just the government that is looked to offer all the answers, but also the local nonprofits do step up and have helped us in a long way here in Fort Collins.
Thanks, Seve. Janet, anything to add? Or Allison, I know that you all as CPRA have at least convened some conversations among your members about some of the detailed challenges of this.
Yeah, honestly, I would defer to Seve and Janet in this one as agency leaders, because we try to create the forum for these conversations. But what I really like to tell people is that we're, as any state and even nationally, we're so diverse in the size and the culture and the way that communities are led and the challenges and all of the above. So this is an area where I'd really have to defer to these other leaders on the panel.
And not having very many parks per se, I haven't had to deal with it as directly, I think, as Seve has. So he really is the expert. The only thing that we've done from our staff perspective is, once we recognize there is someone who does not have a domicile, we make it very clear that they can come and use our facilities for showers or whatnot. And we do try to connect them with resources in the community as best we can.
And Lisa, I might just add one other thing. I think this is an area where we still have a lot of work to do, right? And so the reason I say I have to defer to the Seve, thank you for being here, but is because I think we are still figuring this out. It is one of those very complicated issues. There are so many different layers, and we've talked about trying to put together training for our members, but even just wrapping our heads around that, what that could look like, is vast, right? So I think it's worth recognizing here for everybody that there's a lot of work to do, a lot of learning to do. We're still on the path to figuring out what this was going to be like in the long term.
And Lisa, if I may add just one more thing, I wasn't quite here yet in Fort Collins, but at the height of the pandemic in 2020, one of our recreation centers here in Fort Collins, the Azarlan Center, was basically leveraged as a as a homeless shelter, so to speak, for I believe at least the whole summer, if not a little bit longer into the fall. And we had offered, I believe, just over 100 beds, physically distant and so on. And then also the nonprofits took care of the feeding and all of that at the center itself. So it was one of those things that worked out. And actually, from the stories I've been told, homeless folks from around the area, even in Larimer County, as far as Cheyenne, Laramie, came down to Fort Collins to avail that during the height of the COVID last summer.
Yeah, another good point about the regionality of this, right? It's not like, oh, and I'm leaving the special district that is the one park, and that's not how our community members think about the park system, right? Thank you for that. And you're really highlighting something else for me that is through all of this, and that is the need for partnerships. So we talked about partnerships with public health and how that's been growing and evolving, and this partnerships with our housing folks, and you mentioned police and others, and that role, that evolving role of Parks and Recreation in that community, creating the conditions in a whole community where people can be healthy. Teresa, we have 4 minutes left. Did you have something on this one before? I'd love just a perspective on how does someone get into the field of Parks and Recreation if they've already kind of gone down another path and are interested.
Maybe just kind of a summary comment. We have unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get all the questions in the Q&A, but I see kind of a theme that's weaving through here. And it's kind of about, one of them is how do we figure out what to do with people who are over 60 plus? How do we deal with people of different demographics? How do we determine where parks should go? And so probably the biggest shift in Parks and Recreation that I have seen in the last 10 to 15 years is the increased use of technology for systems planning. And where it used to be that we would have anecdotal meetings and we kind of go, oh, so-and-so's coming to a public meeting, and so we need to address that. It was very reactive. And I think overall planning in public affairs we've all seen this from the planning realm, is that we have the ability now, whether it's looking at, under-resourced populations or homeless populations or people with disabilities, or, we serve every single segment of our community. So the very first thing that we have to do is figure out who lives there, who has needs, and then look at the system and compare it to that. And I'm very optimistic. Sometimes I get accused of being a Pollyanna, but we have the tools to be able to figure that out. The one thing that I know in working across the country is that every community is different. So where Seve is different, it is working very different. Janet's running a special district. It's very different where she is. Denver is very different, and all across the country. So the answer is not here's the one size fits all for Parks and Recreation, or here's what an agency should do. It really is to make sure that all of our agencies have an overall systems plan in place that's well funded and is updated every 3 to 5 years. There's some basic best practices to figure it out, and we can do that in every given community. Now, to just kind of piggyback into your question about how do we move forward and get people into the field, I'm opening that up. I know Janet was just part of a conversation we had earlier on the State of Education Committee about this need. Number one, we have to tell the story better. And so if people don't know what all of the benefits of Parks and Recreation within our field and what we're providing within all of our communities, then they can't figure out how to support us, and they may not even know there's a job there. So that's the number one thing, is we have to identify that. But then we have to also get across to them, how do they get into it? Is it which type of program? Is it going to CSU? Is it being part of the prep program? Are there other programs that are more available for them? And making sure that they can figure out at any level, whether it's continuing education, how they can learn more and get involved with this ever-growing field. But we have to come together with combined messaging and really just do it together. And I guess that's where I'm coming from. Janet, do you want to add anything about in terms of details of how you see we can get professionals into our field?
Again, I could talk for days. I think one of the things that was brought up this morning that is something I've talked about for a long time is getting the existing professionals to see these captive 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds we already have working in our agencies and encouraging them to join the field. It's bottom line, it's our responsibility to perpetuate the future of the industry. And I've been talking about that forever and was really glad to hear it come up this morning.
Thanks for that. Well, our time is up. And again, I think all of us could probably sit here and talk for another hour, and you all might be able to listen to us. The reality is that the field of Parks and Recreation continues to evolve in even more dynamic ways over time, and that Colorado has a really dynamic sort of ecosystem of that. And so I'm excited to see that grow and evolve and change. So thanks everyone for bringing your stories and all of that. To those of you who are interested, our November First Friday will be again about elections. So there's some interesting things happening around redistricting and a very long ballot if you're in Denver. So we'll have some experts talking us through that, our election issue in November. So we hope you'll join us then again online. And someday we will be back in person, but not quite yet. So thanks for your attention today. And for those of you that are working in Parks and Recreation, thank you so much for everything that you've done over the past several months to make sure that your programs and facilities and the parks are a place that we could all really get out of our own houses. It's been really important and I know not easy for you. So thanks for your work in that. And we'll see you all next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.